Thin Wood Walls, Chapter 13. Winter faded. Men transformed bare stretches of dirt into baseball fields. Games began. Baseball, softball, played by boys, girls, men. Crowds of people came just to watch. I played often, Mike seldom. Sometimes the games were organized. Sometimes we just showed up and chose teams. While we played, it was easier to imagine we were outside the fences, away from the emptiness of Thule. When I wasn't playing ball, I passed my time with Mike or May or Philip or some of the other kids from school, or by myself. Sometimes I would take my journal and walk, observing, thinking about what I saw, thinking about words. Spring turned into summer. The weather became cloudless and hot. Mike graduated. To what? I tried not to think about it. The school year ended for me, too. I didn't miss Mr. Moffat, and I didn't really miss school. It had gotten hard for me to think of one without the other. But now, there were more hours to fill. Kids in our block spent their days at the baseball fields, walking to the canteen, looking for shade, sitting, reading comic books, talking, wasting time. May and I still dug for shells. We still played marbles. Some other guys and I formed a baseball team. We called it a team anyway. When our ball fell apart, I finally brought out the one I'd gotten from Ray. Soon it was scuffed and dirty. I didn't care, I told myself. There were other baseballs out there, and someday I'd be able to walk into a store and buy one. After sundown, the air cooled, and we played hide-and-seek or tag, or war, always good guys and Nazis. Sometimes there would be entertainment, a talent show, a dance, a scratchy-looking movie at the mess hall or outside, but most of the time I wouldn't go. Most of the time, once Mike got home from the farm, I wanted to be with him. We'd seen less and less of Philip. He'd told us his parents had answered no to the 2 big questions on the form. Now they kept him away from most of the other kids. They made him get new friends. They kept him busy with Japanese language classes. May and I were walking into the canteen one day when he came out of a barracks, walking toward us. "How are you doing, Philip?" I said when we got close. Nothing. He didn't even look. We stopped. He kept going, eyes straight ahead. I watched him walk past like a mummy. "Philip?" I said to his back. Nothing. "Don't bother, Joe," May said. "What's the matter with him?" "I talked to him once after school got out," she said, "when no one was around. He's not going back to regular school in the fall. His parents have forbidden him to speak English." "You're kidding." "No, there are many others, too." We continued on toward the canteen while I tried to get used to the idea of never talking Philip again. I couldn't. Summer wore on. On July 4th there was a carnival with food and games. It was fun, a change from the day-to-day, a chance to honor our country's birthday, but many people stayed away. A few weeks later, I woke to hammering, the sounds of machinery. Mom and I went outside and followed the noises. They led us toward the fences. The scenery was changing. Crews of men were busy building new fences. One was tall, cyclone and barbed wire. Familiar, but 30 or 40 feet beyond it was a shorter wood and barbed wire barrier was going up. Other crews were hammering and sawing, putting together some kind of wood framework next to the cyclone fence. "I have heard talk of this," Mom said. "What's happening?" I asked her. "2 fences now," Mom said. "No man's land in between. More guard towers." "Why?" I said. "No one's gotten out. Has anyone ever tried?" "They're afraid someone will." "Who?" "No knows." All the people who had answered no and no from the 9 other camps are being sent here. Some people here will be sent to those camps. "No knows," I said. Who had given them that name? The fences continued to go up as summer wore on. Guard towers took shape. More soldiers came in to man them or walk the perimeter with their guns. Tanks rolled in and set up in the army area with their cannons facing us. "Don't worry about it," Sandy told me one day. "This is what the Army calls a show of force." "They're not going to shoot us?" "There are some unhappy people coming here," he said. "Some troublemakers, probably, but nobody's going to shoot anybody." I felt better, but it was hard to ignore the extra soldiers, the tanks, the reason for their coming. I wasn't looking forward to the arrival of the no-nos. The harvest began, and Mike came back from the fields, tired and dirty, but with life in his eyes. He saw better things to come. I knew, freedom and adventure, a chance to prove himself. Like Tom Sawyer making plans for a trip down river, picturing himself on his raft, full of wonder at what might lie around the bend. August blurred by. Molly, the granddaughter of grandmother's friend, Mrs. Nomura, left camp to go off to college in Illinois. Otherwise, the month seemed much like July, but Molly's leaving meant September was next. And my birthday. And Mike's. September arrived, unwelcome. School started. 8th grade. Mrs. Berger was my teacher, a nice lady who learned my name the first day, who seemed glad to be teaching us. But how many years would it be before I saw a real school? The days turned darker, both outside and inside our apartment, where Mom and Grandmother grew more and more quiet. I would look up from something and see them staring at Mike as if they were drinking him in. One warm afternoon, May was at her embroidery class. Mike was working. I decided to take a walk with my journal. As I headed toward the gate, I noticed other people going in the same direction. 4 families carrying bags and boxes and luggage. 3 young men, small duffels in their hands, walking tall. 2 teenage girls carrying suitcases, smiling. I fell in close behind the young men, trying to match their long strides. We neared the gate. More people were already there, forming groups. An army sergeant, tall and wiry, shook hands with the men I had followed, and others standing near us. Army recruits. I thought of Mike. I moved up closer to the sergeant with a sudden wish in front of my mind. He would take me. Mike wouldn't have to go. The sergeant noticed me standing there. "Your little brother come along to say goodbye?" he asked the young guy closest to me. Little brother? We looked nothing alike. "New recruit, I think, Sergeant," the guy said, smiling. I nodded. "I'm thinking about it," I said, lowering my voice. The sergeant grinned down at me. I waited for him to tell me to come back in 6 years and 12 inches. "Your mama wouldn't like that, little son," the sergeant said. "But you'll get your chance. You're the kind of soldier the Army's looking for." What kind was that, I wondered. "I'm good with Morse code," I said, "quick and accurate." "You keep working on it, lad. The Signal Corps will be after you like a trophy catfish." "When?" I said. I had been forced to become a patient person, but my newfound patience had its limits. "When you're ready," the sergeant said. "When your mama's ready. When we're ready. And when Father Time's ready." "Oh," I said. That was too many people to get ready. I wouldn't be taking Mike's place. I wandered away and sat on the ground close by to watch the goings-on. A couple of months earlier, traffic in and out of the gate had been like a slow drip from a faucet. Farm workers, guards, government people, delivery people, a few young men leaving for the Army, a few students going off to college in the East. Now it was all those, plus more. Thousands more, I had heard. Some of these families were leaving for homes outside the camp, sometimes far away. I could see them trying not to smile too widely, but not always succeeding. Others, those who didn't have to cover up smiles, were moving to other camps to make way for the new group moving in. No-nos. They were supposed to begin arriving any day. Now, more people came. Lines formed. Cars and buses pulled up to wait. Smiling families got in cars driven by white men and women who greeted them with more smiles. Other families walked through the gate and up the road toward the highway and railroad tracks. Students got on one bus, Army recruits on another. Cars left, buses left. For a while, the entrance was empty. The sentries had nothing to do. In the distance, a train whistle sounded. The train approached, chuffing, slowing, braking. I waited. The Army sentries suddenly went on alert. Some went outside the gate and formed a line, rifles angled across their chests. 3 jeeps full of police-capped wardens and 2 full of immigration guys with their flat-brimmed hats raced past me and up to the gate. They piled out, all business, guns and leather and serious faces. I felt my stomach rise. Other people stopped to look, and the wardens told them to clear a space. Someone was coming. I thought I knew who. Bad guys? No-nos? The uniformed men stood tall. Some paced or shifted their weight from foot to foot. Some fingered their guns. They waited. And then the first of the arrivals walked into view. An old man and woman, weighed down with bags. A family with 3 small kids. A couple with 2 teenage boys. None of them looked like bad guys. More came. Lots of old people wearing lost expressions. More families. Young men arrived, walking shoulder to shoulder, swaggering, meeting the uniformed stares, smiling, frowning, blank-faced, but cocky. Bad guys, maybe? All the no-nos lined up at tables to fill out papers once more. A young man glanced at me, then away, the way Mr. Moffat did. I wasn't good enough. I was some kind of traitor. The old people were dressed in layers of winter clothes. Their faces glistened in the sun. Worn down, they sat on boxes and suitcases while they waited. Finally, it was time for all of them to go, for the wardens to herd them to their barracks. One old woman got up and gestured to her husband, but he shook his head and kept sitting. She looked around anxiously. She looked at me. I got up. I went to them. "Would you like some help, grandmother?" I said. The old man peered up at me. His face was carved with wrinkles. "You do lessons?" the old woman said, glancing at my journal. I slipped it inside my shirt. "I'm doing nothing." "Please then," she said, something to the old man in Japanese. He struggled to his feet. I tied a bag over my shoulder and picked up the man's suitcase and one of the woman's. Now she had only one to carry. All he had was a small duffel. We walked, trying to keep in sight of the main group, but we didn't have to worry. A warden was lagging behind, keeping an eye on us. Maybe he thought the old man and woman were going to make a getaway. My back and arms grew weary. Sweat trickled down my face. Their barracks was past ours. A long walk, and the old man was having a hard time putting one foot in front of the other. I stopped to shift my load once, to give them a chance to rest, and then we were off again. Finally, we arrived. A warden directed us to an apartment. A block manager checked the couple's names, Masao and Eiko Terada, off a list. I carried their belongings inside. Mr. Terada sat on a bare bunk while his wife looked around the room. It looked just like ours, but emptier. She shrugged and said something to her husband. He managed a sad-eyed smile. Shikata ga nai. I had heard the expression before, even before we'd left the White River Valley. I knew what it meant, but Mrs. Terada translated for me. Means, "It cannot be helped," she said. I glanced at the walls. "Government," I said. She grinned at me. It was grandmother's grin. Yes. She found her purse and took out a wrinkled dollar bill and held it out to me. "For you." I backed toward the door. "I can't take it," I said. "You saved us," she said, still reaching out with the money. I held up my arm and showed her my bicep. I flexed it. "I'm trying to get stronger," I said. "For sports. Thank you for letting me carry your things." I started through the door. "What is your name?" she said. "Joe," I called back. "Joe Hanada." I went home and told grandmother how nice Mrs. Terada was. I told her she should arrange a visit. Maybe she could add Mrs. Terada to her list of friends. But not all no-nos were nice. Before, even though everyone in camp believed what was happening was wrong, most expressed their beliefs quietly. They went along. They hoped time would return their lives to normal. But many no-nos arrived with different attitudes, different loyalties, and wore them like badges. And even though none were put in barracks in our block, they were free to roam the camp, harassing people who didn't share their beliefs. I thought the feeling at the camp was ugly before. Now it was worse. Mike kept doing his job at the farms. I hoped he would like it so much he wouldn't want to leave. But what then? The job would end after harvest, soon after his birthday, his 18th birthday. Then what would hold him? Winter behind barbed wire? 200 chilly days of wasted time? 200 dark nights hunched over a stove? One night after supper, he asked me if I wanted to play catch. "I'll get my ball," I said. "I've got a special one," he said. We went out to the fire break. He opened up a bread bag and took out the special ball. But it wasn't a ball. It was a hockey puck-shaped chunk of the brined liver they served us too often at the mess hall. He slammed it to the hard dirt. It bounced back up. "Perfect," I said. We tossed it back and forth, close together at first, then moving out. When we missed, it hit the ground and carromed off in crazy directions, gathering dust, which ended up greasy on our hands and clothes. We laughed. People walked by giving us looks. "We need a bat," Mike said. "Yeah," I said. "Maybe one of those stale loaves of bread we had for lunch today." We played until dirt caked our hands and dusk had settled in, and we were tired of laughing. Then Mike ran toward the fence and launched the lump of insides far into the air, far out over the fence. "For the coyotes," he said. "I hope they survive," I said. We laughed. "Dogs," someone said. I turned back toward our barracks. 20 feet away, 3 guys were standing, half slouching, hands jammed in their pockets. Mike's age, probably, maybe older. No-nos. "What?" Mike said, stepping in front of me. "Dogs," the tallest one repeated. "The white sentries watch you from their towers and think what playful footlickers you are, and how you are so grateful to be here." His friends laughed, forced and loud. I looked around. No one else was nearby. My insides rumbled. "Dogs?" Mike's shoulders squared. His hands came up. His knees flexed a fraction of an inch. I moved up next to him. My legs felt watery, suddenly, but I could help, maybe. He'd taught me a few things. Dad had taught me a few things. "Dogs are brave and quick and fight to protect their homes," Mike said. "Hyenas laugh stupidly and smell bad and follow the stink of death." The smirks on the 3 guys' faces disappeared. They strutted towards us and stopped a stride away. In my throat, a fat frog expanded its chin pouch until I could barely breathe. "There are 3 of us," the tall guy in the middle said. "1 of you. So who is stupid?" "2 of us," Mike said, and my throat emptied. My heart swelled. The hyenas giggled. "You think you have it bad here?" Mike said. "You want to go to Japan?" The middle guy nodded. "Then you are the stupid one," Mike said. The guy frowned. The hyena on our right sidled away from the pack, working his way behind us. I half turned to watch, but Mike seemed to ignore him. "Japan isn't your country any more than Italy or Poland or Germany is the country of that sentry up in the tower. You'll be lost there, trying to survive in the ruins of Japan's defeat." I hoped Mike was right, but I wanted him to shut up. These guys weren't here to talk. Maybe if he didn't make them too mad, they'd just go away. "You believe too much of what you hear," the guy said. "Propaganda from a government that turned its back on you." He took his eyes off Mike, looked past him for an instant. "You need a lesson," he said. His smirk came back. "Now." Suddenly, the guy behind us leaped on Mike's back. His forearm went around Mike's neck. I moved to help, but the guy on the left grabbed me from behind, pinning my arms, raising his fist to my throat. I felt suffocated. I raised my foot and slammed it down on the top of his, just as Mike took a quick step forward and flexed at the waist, and the guy riding him went airborne, upside down. He landed in the dirt with a thud and a grunt and an explosion of dust. I kept struggling as the chief hyena rushed at Mike, but Mike sidestepped him and grabbed his arm as he went by. He twisted it and jammed it high up towards the guy's shoulder blades, forcing him down to his knees. "Let go of my brother or I'll break this fool's arm," Mike said to my guy. Flying hyena still lay on the ground, groaning, not laughing. "Tell your friend to let my brother go," Mike said to his guy, putting on more pressure. The friend still had me, but I felt his grip relaxed. I breathed deep and swallowed hard. Mike forced the arm higher. "Let him go," the leader grunted. My guy swore and turned me loose, and I spun away to stand near Mike. I felt nauseated. One of them was on his knees, one on his back, and one stood helplessly, waiting for orders. "Good," Mike said. He still had his guy down. "Between now and the day you hyenas sail off," he said, breathing hard, "I don't want to see your faces again. If you cause my brother trouble, I'll find you. They'll send you to Japan in a box." Silence, interrupted only by the sound of breathing, hung over us. A thin layer of ground fog moved in through the dusk. "Understood?" Mike said. The guy on his back found his voice. "Understood," he said, between quick gulps of air. "Okay," the other two chorused. Mike backed away and stood side by side with me. Chief Guy got to his feet, flexing his arm. He and the guy I'd been dancing with helped the other one up. Without a word, they limped off into the gloom. "Good job, Joe," Mike said, wiping his hands together. I looked at mine. Most of our greasy mud was gone. I pictured it in streaks on the no-no's clothes. "You taught them a lesson," I said. "But have they learned one?" he said, and I remembered Dad's words about lessons. I remembered what Mom had told us. To lose is to win. Were those guys the winners then? Didn't feel like it. Someone walked out of the shadow of our barracks, like a ghost through the mist. He got closer, and I saw he was tall, uniformed, smiling. Sandy. "Young citizens," he said, held out his hand, and we shook. Mike first, then me. A family walked by, looking at us curiously. Where had they been a few minutes earlier? "I'm glad you fellas were able to handle that problem," he said. "I could have stepped in, but then, what about the next time? Maybe I wouldn't be around?" "You saw it?" Mike said. "Nice moves," Sandy said to Mike. "And you were holding your own, Joe." "He was too strong. 3 at a time would have been tough," Mike said to me. "You'll be 18 soon, Mike?" Sandy said. 2 weeks. "Plans?" "The Army." The way Mike said it, so sure, gave me the chills. "Even after this?" Sandy said, gesturing toward the barracks and the sentry towers, the fences. Mike nodded. "This is my country too," he smiled. "I am a young citizen." Sandy looked down at Mike's face for a long time, as if he were trying to see behind it, see what made Mike work. "We, the Army, could use warriors. You'll make a hell of a soldier." That wasn't what I wanted to hear. I wanted Sandy to tell him he didn't owe anyone anything, but I looked at Mike and knew even Sandy's words wouldn't have made a difference. Maybe Sandy knew it too. He took 2 Baby Ruths from his pocket. "Dessert?" he said, holding them out to us. Mike took one. I took the other. My fingers trembled. We savored the taste of the candy all the way to the bathroom, where we tried to clean up. Then we trudged back to our room while we talked about what excuse we could make to Mom and Grandmother for our appearance. But they seemed not to notice. Maybe they were used to us looking like hobos. My whole body still felt shaky from our meeting with the no-nos. But I had something to write. I sat on my bunk with my journal and began. By the time I finished writing of no-nos, bullies, and me, scared, and Mike, brave, it had grown late. Mike turned out the light, and my family got into bed, and I listened while Mom talked in the dark of her day, of slicing open a big fish to clean it for cooking, and finding its stomach full of maggots. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, but my heart still pounded, my ears filled with the night sounds of my family, even breathing, and uneven dreams. On the other side of the wall, the Suzuki family stirred and coughed and murmured. Outside, ghostly lights reflected off barbed wire. Soldiers watched from towers. I fell asleep and dreamed. The no-nos came back, wounded and maggoty, walking on all fours, fangs glistening, snarling. I'm alone. I woke in the dark, in the cold, sweating. By the day of Mike's birthday, he had already made arrangements for his leaving. The Army was eager to have him. Sandy had volunteered to drive him to Klamath Falls, where he would take his physical and be sworn in and leave for basic training. But not for 3 more days. Not until the day after my birthday. We had a party for both of us on my birthday. We invited May and her family, and James Ito and his family. No Philip. The room felt crowded, but empty at the same time. They sang Happy Birthday twice, We had cake from the mess hall and cold soda pop from Sandy. We opened presents from Mom, clothes for me, stationery and a box of pencils for Mike. Grandmother gave us small, smooth stones with Japanese symbols painted on them. Strength for Mike, patience for me. You haven't noticed, Grandmother, I said. What, Joseph? My patience. It's improved. The stone is just a reminder, she said, for when patience becomes a choice again, instead of a sentence. For when we are no longer under the government's thumb. I couldn't wait for that day, and now I had another reason, to prove to Grandmother that my patience was real. No longer was I the little kid counting days until Christmas. May got me a new pen. The O'Briens sent me another coat, Mike a St. Christopher medal. He put it on. I imagined it jangling against his dog tags, working its magic. But would it? How many dead soldiers had St. Christopher's image hanging from their necks? I was 13 now, but suddenly I felt younger instead of older, on the edge of crying like a baby. Mom gave us 2 packages from the unknown person again. Sandy, I decided, but he had never admitted to last year's mystery gifts. I opened mine, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Mike unwrapped his, The Red Badge of Courage. Grandmother looked at my book. I know this one, she said. Mark Twain. She picked up Mike's, shaking her head. War, she said. It ends okay, Grandmother, Mike said, and gave her a hug. He was up early the next day, before we could strap him to his bed, before I was all the way awake. He was gone before the sun had cleared the hills, before tears came. I stood with Mom and Grandmother and watched as a tail of dust trailed the jeep out of camp and disappeared. I felt empty, but not hungry. I skipped breakfast and went back to our room. Mike's few belongings were piled in a corner. I looked for his journal. It was gone. I wondered if he had ever written anything in it. Would he now? I got mine from my duffel. I found some words.